I will never forget driving in front of your house on Roxbury. Your mother was standing in the doorway. She had on slacks that was sort of the king and I blue color, a pink fuzzy sweater on with the orange hair, and it was exactly like when I was a kid, when I'd see movie magazines, when it would say, "A visit with Lucille Ball," standing at the door. My dear, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven.
Lucy, in my childhood, was very, very, in that respect, growing up in that home, very public.
It's like when you grow up and you have people rapping on your door 27 times a day, is that a fair number? You know, saying, is she home, are they home, pulling the grass out of your lawn.
But the interesting thing was that Mom and Dad, who lived in other areas in Beverly Hills where he was secluded.
When I first came to California, your mother wanted me to live there at the house, which I was certainly thrilled to do. I mean, the next door neighbor is Jack Benny.
Oh, I gotta tell you about Jack Benny. He came over one night at dinner time.
I swear to you, we're sitting there eating. Jack Benny comes in playing the violin.
Just walked around the table 3 times, never said a word.
Didn't say, "Is this funny?" Forget it. Nothing. We heard him go all the way home. Da 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 da. I thought, this is really a miracle here I'm living.
Another thing that my Aunt Lucy did was, much to my mother's horror, she took me into her own at-home beauty salon and proceeded to give me a permanent. I think at that time I was about 3. I remember sitting in that tall chair with the drape around me, and my aunt she took hours, and she was really into it with, doing me up and styling it afterwards.
I will always remember that she would always fool with my hair. And she said, if I hadn't been in movies, I would have been a beautician. We'd have to go out to the back house. She had a little beauty shop set up. And my dear, she almost ruined my hair. She would do permanents when I shouldn't have had a permanent. But again, I just couldn't tell Lucille Ball, go get herself a job. I just sat there like a dummy and let her ruin my hair.
Well, I remember she would sit me down. She'd be sitting in a chair like this, and the cast would be sitting around her. She'd put me down on the floor and comb my hair. And she would, just to have something to do with her hands while she was reading. And she'd say, if I just had a shampoo bowl in here, I'd wash it.
I remember playing Monopoly with your mother in the living room, that swag lamp, that ugly swag lamp.
Which, if you get a chance to go to Universal Studios, the lamp is sitting over her backgammon table. And if you notice, there's a funny little thing on the bottom of the lamp.
I personally am embarrassed by being there. I think, in fact, at one time, Earl, remember Earl the handyman?
He was a character, and when she got into playing backgammon, she had him make all the backgammon tables, and then she had a spotlight up above, and her objection was that the spotlight, not only was it shining on the table, it was also shining in her eyes, and objection was that the spotlight, not only was it shining on the table, it was also shining in her eyes, and she asked Earl, she said, "Earl, come in here, I have a problem." So Earl would go in, and she says, "Well, this light is also shining in my eyes. Do you think you could do anything about it?" So Earl would grunt and say, "Well, let me think about it." And so the next day, he had it all figured out.
You know what he'd done? He'd painted a coffee can gold and put it up in the light. Didn't bother her at all. I don't know if she ever noticed. She just knew the light was just swell. A coffee can in Lucille Ball's home, my daughter. She owned the world.
It served its purpose, and she was a very practical person.
Jesse, isn't this beautiful? This is the brand new 1960 Westinghouse refrigerator.
You broke it. Refrigerators don't open in the middle. Do something.
Well, what happened?
My parents had become America's best known and most admired married couple. They both worked very hard to promote their image.
She worked very hard. She was willing to work just like all the time, love rehearsal.
If you want something done, ask a busy person to do it, because the more you do, the more you can do. And don't you throw Forget it.
Desi just seemed to run the studio with one hand and the show with another. I don't know how he did it. We used to call him the Cuban arm because he could charm you and then he'd come and put his arm around you, call you amigo.
They were there very early, and then of course he was running back and forth from the set to, juggling the business, and the pressure was building.
They were never really as happy with any of the rest of it, any of the trappings and the houses and the kids, as they were when they were at work.
And to spend the time in their careers that Lucy and Desi had to spend to do it successfully, they had to take some time away from their kids. And they're raised by the servants.
Willie Mae Barker was her name. She was another woman in my life, as well as my mother and my grandmother, Dee Dee.
She had Dee Dee to take care of you, and that's as good as her, Lucille, taking care of you, in her mind. And now that may not be right, but she didn't think it was wrong. She really didn't.
I really feel that Lucille just didn't have the tools to learn to mother or to nurture. They just weren't there for her. I think Lucille had to be an adult as a child, just had to take over because Dee Dee was always working.
I never learned to have a playful relationship with my mother because we were always too busy.
In that respect, I never saw your mother play with you. I didn't. She would say, I love you, and that, but I never saw her play with you.
I remember your mother being very on when people were around, and then when people were not around, being very off. It was like your mom had an on-off switch.
I like discipline in children. I like to be able to have the children likable so that other people will like them.
Yeah.
I know. I don't want a little brat running around. It's bad enough what they do.
If she wasn't in control, then she was pretty unhappy.
She was always so busy making sure everything was right. She wanted you all to be, everything to be perfect. I think your daddy always impressed me as he knew you weren't and he wasn't. He was more outwardly affectionate.
He was working all the time. But when he came home, he would do stuff with us.
My father had this amazing sense of wonder at the miracle of nature. He'd just shake your hand and walk you around and say things to you about, look at that sunset. God really outdid himself tonight. And Lucy and I would sit there looking at, like, wow. And he'd instill in us this sense that there was something about this life that was worth living.
When my mother came home, she would still be working. Do you know what I'm saying? She would still be working. I have to fight every day of my life not to go home to my kids and be there physically but not be there. I'm still on the phone. I'm still cleaning silver. I'm still cleaning a closet. I'm not, hello, Mom, you've been gone all day. Could we just sit down and color or go outside? It was really hard for her to be there.
In ways, I feel sort of sorry for her because I feel that she never let herself go. She never let herself love you kids the way she could have, or maybe even love Desi the way she could have.
Lucille Ball envisioned the white picket fence, and I think indeed believed that fantasy. She did not live it, but in her mind, her interviews were always about the family, my children come first, work is down the line. It is my belief that Lucille Ball's first love was her work.
The best time is when you're working and you're happy, and we really had a ball.
I think there are a lot of parents that can be gone, and when they come back, they're really there. They're really connected with their kids. And I just think that these two people had enough problems of their own, for various reasons, that they needed that work.
In our first